Hi, Lancaster Online viewers, and welcome to our studio at 101 North Queen Street in downtown Lancaster. I'm Jade Campos, a reporter covering politics and government in Lancaster and its suburbs for LNP and Lancaster Online. Our guest today is Democratic Lancaster City Council President Izzy Smith-Wade-El, who is running for the 49th District seat in Pennsylvania's House of Representatives. The district is made up of Southern Lancaster City, Lancaster Township, and Millersville Borough. LNP Lancaster Online invited Smith-Wade-El's opponent in the election, Republican Ann Rivers, to a debate. Rivers declined our invitation. Mr. Smith-Wade-El, welcome to our studio. Can you tell me about your decision to run for state representative after the time you've spent on city council?
Yeah, absolutely. First of all, Jade, I want to say thank you to you and thank you to LNP Lancaster newspapers. The reporting that the organization provides is critical for our community. And frankly, as City Council President, we need a paper of record to publish our advertisements. So we appreciate the work that you do. It has been my distinct honor to serve almost 5 years as the president of Lancaster City Council. We've notched some really big wins in policing, in new investments in affordable housing, in getting lead out of homes where it's endangering children. But over and over again, when it's come to common sense things, like keeping guns out of the hands of dangerous criminals or even out of the hands of children, as we learned tragically last week, can have really serious consequences. On reforming property taxes so that we can keep our seniors and low-income homeowners in their home. Over and over, issues that are critical to the people of my district, we're told, are preempted at the state level. That's a power that only the legislature has, not one that local legislators have. So I'm going to Harrisburg to deliver for my people exactly what they've asked for. One of the best lessons I got from my mother, Jade, the late Dr. Rita Smith-Wade-El, was that when someone asks you for something that you have the power to give, you give it. And if you don't have it to give at that moment, you go out and get more to give. And that's exactly why I'm running in the 49th District.
Great, thank you. And so what do you consider some of the things that you're most proud of during your time on City Council? Like you said, you've been on the council for almost 5 years now.
Yeah, Jade, I would say chief among them are our investments in making sure that people have a safe, affordable home. And I know that a lot of folks who are watching this are saying, okay, but I don't have a safe, affordable home. And first I want to acknowledge that that is the reality for many of our neighbors all across the 49th District, that rent prices, mortgage rates have skyrocketed, and the wages that people go out and work for every day are less and less able to meet them. And this is part of why I'm running, because we need to do this at a higher level. Mm-hmm. Just the same, $5 million of investment in affordable housing last year alone, in addition to an $11.7 million investment in getting lead out of homes, like I said, where it was, tragically affecting children. Lead poisoning is a lifelong challenge. Those are some of the things that I am most proud of. Reforming our city police use of force policy, decriminalizing marijuana, and building new relationships with community partners such as the School District of Lancaster and the Lancaster County Homelessness Coalition, where our organizations need to be working more in concert. Our children are our most precious resource, and more of our neighbors over the past few years are finding themselves without an affordable home to live in. We need to come together as a community to make sure we deliver what our residents deserve.
And so it sounds like you're really interested in continuing that work to increase access to affordable housing in the 49th District. So what are some of your plans if you're elected to, focus on policies around affordable housing?
Yeah, first of all, I'd like to draw everyone's attention to the whole home repairs bill, which is going to bring $125 million to communities all across the Commonwealth to help low-income, to help Black and brown homeowners stay in their homes. Now, we not only want to see that program delivered effectively, we want to see that program expand. We want to see more state funding. for developing affordable housing or preserving affordable homes, as we previously mentioned, and especially funding to what we call continuums of care. These are local organizations that lead their communities in addressing homelessness. Jade, there was a study from the Government Accountability Office in 2019 which suggested the following. Nationwide, every $100 increase in median gross rent meant that the likelihood that an individual was going to be homeless increased by 9%. Not 9 percentage points, but 9%. Still a significant impact. And so whatever we can do to develop the supply of affordable housing and increase wages and reform property taxes so that our cities aren't taxing our most vulnerable neighbors in order to support them. Anything that we can do in those directions is going to be a success. So like I said, the whole home repairs program, but also property tax reform is a need for small cities like Lancaster and the communities that surround them all over the Commonwealth. I would say there's about 53 third-class cities in the Commonwealth, Jade. They represent about 1.3 million Pennsylvanians, and their representatives are Democrats, their representatives are Republicans, and they are united in this thing, that their local legislators don't have the power to deliver what their constituents deserve. So we're gonna make some changes in that and some other areas, like I said, to deliver what our constituents deserve.
And you mentioned that Lancaster is a third-class city, and that's something that you've spoken about before and about your interest in returning powers to local government. Can you kind of explain what that means in the context of Lancaster being a third-class city, and what kind of changes you hope to see?
Yeah. So the short version, the version that's going to matter to most of our viewers, is that when you call on your city council person, or if you live in Lancaster Township, your township supervisor, your borough council person in Millersville, and you ask them, you say, we should have a property tax break specifically for seniors. You need to know that the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania has decided that that's not a power that they should have at the local level. The Commonwealth has decided that legislators like my colleagues on city council shouldn't have the power to pass common sense gun legislation like safe storage laws to keep our kids safe. And these things are really, they're not just about delivering what we need for our residents. They're also about restoring the faith of people in government. When your local legislator can deliver, the person you can reach out and touch and talk to can deliver on what you're asking from them, you have a community that has an easier time coming together around government. And look, the next 5 to 10 years are going to be challenging all across the nation, and particularly as we come out of the COVID-19 pandemic in Pennsylvania. We need legislators that believe in their people, and we need to give people a reason to believe in their legislators.
Great. And do you see any other issues that you think are new challenges to you, looking in the 49th district, since you've specifically been working in the city? So are there any new issues that are unique to Lancaster Township or Millersville Borough, or do you see it as, a big community that is sharing a lot of the same issues and a lot of the same concerns heading into this election cycle?
Yeah, so as you mentioned, the 49th is made up of 3 very different communities. So you have the urban community in Lancaster City, you have more suburban and rural communities in Millersville and in Lancaster Township. I'll tell you, the thing that I have found unites them, Jade, 2 issues. Again, property tax reform, local control, and education. Parents in SDOL and in Penn Manor School District, they're proud and they're protective of their children, and they're proud of their schools, and they want state legislators not to hold their schools back, but to provide opportunities for their children, for your children, to excel and thrive. An issue that I think goes under the radar is that while we're, for example, giving tax breaks to racehorse breeders in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, Special education expenditures have increased by $1 billion in the past decade. Now, like I said, we're giving tax breaks to people who breed racehorses, which I guess is a fine way to spend your time if you like, but only 10% of that difference has been made up by the legislature, which means the other 90%, $900 million roughly, is coming out of your property taxes and out of your pockets. And so we have a situation where our kids aren't getting what they need, and we're overtaxing our residents to pay for services that are not well funded enough to help children excel. Now, I know that disability and disability accommodations have been much in the political eye lately. But what I will say is that I'm a person with multiple learning disabilities who had a lot of challenges making it through school as a young person. And so the value of special education services is clear to me. I benefited from a really well-educated, aggressive, passionate mother and teachers who really cared about my success and were able to provide me with additional supports. There are thousands of children all across the 49th district who deserve every bit of the care and support that I got. And their teachers, their school districts, their school board members, they want to deliver it, and they need a state legislature that supports them.
It sounds like education is a big issue, like you said, for a lot of the 49th district. So is there any kinds of policy changes that you're hoping to see if you're elected to the seat, putting more funding into education?
Yeah, of course. 100% of our funding needs to go through the fair funding formula. In addition to that, like I said, we're going to especially fund special education. We're going to extend the lead work that's happening in Lancaster's homes and making sure that our school districts have specific funding for infrastructure and asset improvements. Here's what I mean. Where we have schools in the district where they're waiting, where students are waiting for them to put a new elevator in, there ought to be funding coming from the state for those things, to make sure that school is accessible for all, to make sure that in all of our districts, not just SDOL, but all across the Commonwealth, anybody who needs to get a meal at school, breakfast or lunch, can get that. And that just comes with funding. We're going to provide more support for PSEA and its various locals. The teachers' unions fight very hard to protect and serve their children. And we're going to see some new policies, I think, in this new legislature, or we're going to fight like hell for it, for charter school accountability. If these public funds are being sent, to schools that are ultimately private, that ultimately get to select what students they take, they need to be accountable to the taxpayers for how they're spending that money. Public schools, along with libraries, are one of the last examples of something that's very important to me and something that I think we've lost. That's the concept of a public good. This is something where we all come together, because we know, that we thrive together. So I want to make sure that our public schools are fully supported for all of our children, and that their money isn't going out into the wilderness, into the unaccountable bank accounts of people who get to pick and choose which kids they're going to support. We support all of our children here in Lancaster.
Great. And you mentioned the fair funding formula. Can you kind of elaborate a little bit on that? I know that that's something that the 96 Democratic candidate, Mike Sturla, has also talked about as well.
Yeah, and I want to take a moment to give some credit to Representative Mike Sturla. He has been a passionate champion for education since I was 1 year old, his entire tenure in the legislature. I think the easiest way to understand it is our legislature has acknowledged that the way in which funds go to schools from state tax dollars is inequitable. But they've said we're only going to put new funding, increased educational funding through the fair funding formula, and the rest of it is going to be distributed the old way, in a way that we've acknowledged is unfair. And I'll be honest, Jade, that's a little silly to me, the idea that we should have fair funding but not too fair, equitable schools but not too equitable. But I think at the bottom of it, A lot of legislators represent school districts that have been getting the long side of that stick for a long time. And they don't want to have to go back to their districts and say, well, we're balancing this out, so your school is getting less funding. And the good news is this. They don't have to, Jade. If we fund schools in the way that we should in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, we can provide a quality education for every public school student, whether they are in Penn Manor, Conestoga Valley, the School District of Lancaster, Erie, York, Johnstown, you name it. It really just comes back to what are legislators willing to do with the awesome power that we've been given, and frankly, with our community members trusting us to be part of the largest and most expensive full-time legislature in the nation. For all the money that you're spending, you should be getting good schools out of that. You should be getting safe streets and affordable homes, but our legislators aren't passing bills. So we're going to hope to make some changes there as well.
Great. And another one of the big issues, especially nationwide for a lot of Democratic voters who are looking at this election, is access to abortion rights. And a Planned Parenthood recently opened in the 49th district, so it's the issue that especially hits close to home. And you've spoken before about protecting reproductive rights. So can you share a little bit more about your plans if you're elected to office?
Yeah. So one of the things that we have to do right now, we have to elect as many legislators who are going to vote down SB 106 to the legislature this year in November. So what that Senate bill is, Jade, is it's sort of a Frankenstein of bills that would take away from the people of Pennsylvania the right to choose their own lieutenant governor. It would make voting access more hard, particularly for African American and Latino communities. And then most significantly, it would say that there's no right to abortion in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, and basically open the floodgates for any anti-choice, anti-freedom, anti-reproductive justice bill that the legislature wants to pass. So first and foremost, we need to make sure that that doesn't come to pass, that that doesn't end up on the ballot, because if it does, any governor would not be able to veto it. So, this is just the pitch. Come out and vote. Your key freedoms depend on it. What I will say is I can't anticipate what kind of bills are going to come down the pike, but we need to, as Democrats, and as, frankly, Republicans, and as people who value freedom in the United States and in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, we need to codify the right to reproductive justice and health care in the Constitution of the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. We need people to know, as, for example, Black maternal mortality rates are still staggeringly high, that if they want to make difficult, complicated choices, if they have to make those choices, rather, about when and how to have a family, that their state supports their fundamental freedoms and wants to protect their rights. So we're absolutely going to see bills introduced to protect that, Jade. Now here's the question. Will the various committee chairs of the legislature allow those common sense bills to see the floor? Because on other items, common sense gun laws, education funding, gift bans, committee chairs in the legislature have essentially stalled these things out. So we're going to fight like hell to make sure that we protect the reproductive justice and the freedoms of all our residents and their families.
Do you believe that a constitutional amendment that would restrict abortion access, or like you said, say that in the Constitution there's no rights to abortion access, would ultimately lead to a total ban in the state?
Jade, I think the easiest answer to that question is yes. I believe it was Maya Angelou. It might be Angela Davis, and I can hear my mother rolling over in her grave as I'm misquoting some great Black woman authors here. But fundamentally, when someone tells us who they are, we have to believe them. Locally and nationally, Republicans have gotten behind podiums and said, yes, we want total bans on abortions. We already have around the country people attempting to create these restrictions that don't even have exceptions for rape, for incest, for the life of the mother. And so besides even taking away the right, besides taking away the fundamental freedoms of a majority of our population, they're also creating a chilling effect on people's willingness and ability to access health care. We don't want to live in a commonwealth where mothers are afraid to go to the doctor when they fear they have a pregnancy complication because they feel that they'll somehow be criminalized. And we don't want to go, and I want to be clear that this is a reality in other states, where people have been prosecuted for having miscarriages because the state government is dedicated to clamping down on the reproductive freedoms of women and birthing people. I think absolutely, if that constitutional amendment passes, Jade, we will see those attempts to remove reproductive justice entirely from the people of the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. And we have to stand strong against that.
And for Republican voters, the big issue heading into this election has been inflation and the economy. So how do you plan to address concerns about the economy and rising prices if you're elected?
I love that question, Jade. Thank you. We talk a lot about the inability of folks to afford food at the grocery store, and we talk a lot about spiraling prices at the pump. Thank God gas prices, I think I filled up my car yesterday, are only about $3.99 a gallon, and I can't believe I'm saying only. But there's a key kind of inflation that we don't talk enough about, and that's the spiraling increase in housing prices. We talk about folks having to make the choice between buying groceries and paying their rent. For many of our residents, Jade, paying their rent is not even an option. And many of these are folks that work. So we need to organize our whole society to make to make housing affordable. It's the single largest cost for the majority of families, and especially working families. And when we ensure that there's affordable housing throughout our community, when we ensure that seniors can stay in their homes and pass on generational wealth, we open up folks' budgets to better afford food and gas. Now, the other thing that we're not talking about is this. We are seeing record inflation. We're also seeing record corporate profits. That is to say, large companies, CEOs, hedge fund managers are getting more and more of your money that you ought to be spending on more food for your family, more gas to get to work, the things that you need and the things that make up a good life. We need to take action in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, not just on affordable housing, but also on price gouging. These corporate profits, which are made on the back of the American people, that are made on the back of Pennsylvanians, must be either returned to the pockets of those Pennsylvanians or reinvested in their communities. We've seen productivity go up and up for decades. You're working harder, you're retiring later, your money is going somewhere and it's not into your communities. And you need your legislators to figure out where it's going and to bring it back to you.
So you see affordable housing and the economy, the state of the economy right now, kind of as something that's going hand in hand. So your plans, your policies that you plan to push forward if you're elected, you think will kind of affect both of them, access to affordable housing and then helping to address issues with the economy?
Yeah, we're going to need to take on price gouging. We're going to need to take on the cost of prescription medication, Jade. And when we do those things, when we put more money in the pockets of the American people by developing like a genuine social infrastructure. So what I'm talking about is being sure, right, that if you work your whole life and for some reason you become unemployed, you know that the unemployment insurance that you've paid into is there for you. Knowing that, I think, really constitutes a key freedom for our folks. So we need to make sure that that safety net is there, and we need to make sure that we're not seeing these insane profits taken off of the backs of the people who live in our district. I do believe those things go hand in hand, Jade, and just coming home to where we started. Housing is where it all begins for families. It's where we send our kids off to school in the morning. It's where we get ready for work. It's where we make the free and unencumbered choice about what kind of family that we want. So yes, I absolutely believe that it is the linchpin to economic relief and recovery for the people of the 49th District.
Great. And throughout your campaign, you have traveled across the state to join other candidates at speaking events and protests and rallies. Other candidates have joined you here in Lancaster. This weekend, the Lieutenant Governor candidate Austin Davis joined you at the Millersville Parade. Why do you feel like campaigning with other Democratic candidates across the state and outside of your district is important?
You know, usually we get the opposite question. It's how do you, Izzy, think as just one legislator, you're going to be able to go to Harrisburg and make changes on all these lofty issues that you've talked about? That can't be done without relationships with other legislators, and it can't be done without relationships with the organizations that represent working people. You know, I know I'm drifting a little bit, but I know firsthand what organized labor can do for working families and has done for working families in my district. And we're seeing a great new class of legislators who want to be champions of working people, who also want to fully fund whole home repairs, who want to fully fund special education, and who want to reform property taxes in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania to make life easier for our residents. By building relationships with them here and across the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, we're better able to deliver on our values from day one. Here's the short version, y'all. Organizing works. Build relationships with your friends, your neighbors, your colleagues. Go out and fight for what you deserve. That's exactly what I plan to do in Harrisburg.
Well, we've reached the end of our interview with Mr. Smith-Wade-El. Are there any closing remarks you'd like to make to our viewers?
Yes, Jade, thank you. So to the people of Lancaster City, to the borough of Millersville, to Lancaster Township, we have an opportunity that for thousands of you, you've never had, which is the opportunity to be represented not just by a Democrat, but by a legislator who cares deeply about the issues that affect your community. You know, as we were talking earlier about inflation, Jade, I think, we think about the challenges that face working families, and we can't build a life without challenges, without pain, without hurt. But we can come together as a district and as a commonwealth to make each of those a little easier, to minimize pain and maximize opportunity, whoever you are, whatever your race, your gender, your body, your level of education, or what you do for work. And so if that's something that matters to you, if you want more affordable homes and safer streets with the guns off of them, and you want better schools, let's do this together. Thank you. And thank you, Jade.
Thank you for joining us. And thank you, viewers, for tuning into this interview. Please check Lancaster Online for other candidate interviews in the upcoming days and weeks. And remember, Election Day is Tuesday, November 8th. Polls are open from 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. that day. If you intend to vote by mail, your completed application must be received in the county office by 5 p.m. on November 1st. The deadline to return your voter absentee or mail-in ballot is 8 p.m. on November 8th, Election Day. And to apply for a mail-in ballot, go to the website votespa.com or stop by your county elections office. In Lancaster County, the elections office is at 150 North Queen Street, Suite 117 in downtown Lancaster.